I am so excited to paint this jumping spider with you. It is all about scraping today. So make sure you have your palette knife ready to go because that's how we're going to achieve all of those whiskery, hairy shapes that you see in the spider. All the supplies that you need for today's paint along are listed in your free PDF supply list that you can get at paint333.com. As for extra supplies, I'm also using this Brusho in Sunburst Lemon. If you've been following me and excited to paint this jumping spider with me, you might have seen that I anticipated the need for this Posca pen in this painting, but I actually don't end up using it. I do, however, use a little bit of this ink pen at the very end of the painting. The reference photo and tracing for this jumping spider are listed in the video's description. Today I am painting on a full-size sheet of 22 by 30 Arches Rough paper. And if you're new here, welcome! I'm Jess and I teach watercolor artists the 333 method for watercolor painting, the 3 properties, the 3 principles, and my 3-step process. And the best place to start on my channel is with my free beginner watercolor program. Here's a couple things about this painting that really made it successful that I want you to lean into as you're painting along. The first thing is this pop of yellow that we see in the head and a little bit on the body. I think leaving that yellow to only be in this area of the painting and also having that yellow right next to this hot pink is really punchy. It sets that area apart and it produces this really nice high contrast too next to that really dark eye. Try not to be too tempted to put yellow everywhere, especially because it's so pretty, or that pink everywhere because it's also very pretty. Save some of those best moments of the painting for those really special areas and don't overdo it. The second thing that I think was really successful about this particular painting was how we painted, or really kind of not painted, the hairs and the whiskers all over the legs and the body. Again, we didn't overdo it. We didn't put all the whiskers on the entire spider everywhere we saw a whisker. I really tried to cluster them specifically on this dark side. We achieved a couple of the whiskery kind of hairy edges with a grainer brush, but for the most part, we just use the technique of scraping. And we further emphasize some of the hairy shapes right below the eyes by also negative painting between the scraped lines. And actually, that's a really great negative painting hack, is to paint between areas where you've scraped. It makes negative painting really easy because you know exactly where to paint. Okay, let's paint. We're going to start with the eyes, but before we do, just make sure you take the time to refine your drawing and include all the parts that you're planning to paint. The tracing that I've provided you is kind of incomplete, especially in the legs and some of the details. So take your time and get that ready for your painting. So I'm going to do the 4 eyes from left to right just because I'm right-handed. And I'm going to start with a nice heavy mix of neutral tint on my size 6 silver black velvet brush. And I'm basically just going to paint a nice outline around the eye shape and around the reflections, giving myself enough of a margin too around those reflections. And then also next to the reflections, I'm planning to put some blue. I'm going to do ultramarine and maybe some cobalt. So I'm not going to completely fill this in with neutral tint. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some ultramarine and put that right next to the reflections. And then just some plain water on a third brush here to let those 2 colors blend together. I'd love these reflections to have thinner lines to kind of distinguish the shape of the reflections. So I'm just going to come in with my palette knife here and kind of pull some of the paint to give myself a little bit of dimension inside that reflection. And I'm just going to go ahead and do the exact same thing on the other 3 eyes. And as I move towards the light side of this spider, which will be the right side, I'm going to add cobalt as well. So not just only ultramarine, but I think the addition of cobalt could look really nice too. And I'm going to lift up a little bit of that water on this eye, maybe drop in a little bit more ultramarine. If it gets too dark, that's kind of why I'm doing that. And now I'm going to grab some cobalt as we move towards the light side here for some of the reflections on this side. And my handy dandy palette knife, I'm going to just pull some of that paint to give myself some really nice, beautiful, thin lines for these reflections. And maybe a little bit more water, just so things move around and have fun. And I'm kind of babysitting the other eyes as I do the last two eyes too, just to make sure they're not getting too dark, or maybe I need to add more color or more water, whatever it might be. I just think it looks really cool right now, but it's probably going to dry a little bit less dramatic than that. But we can help and we can babysit and lift and add color to our little spider eyes. We're on our last eye. I've never painted something with so many eyes. I love dropping in a little bit of water after I lift too, so that it still can get those watery things, those watery effects that we're looking for. Because when you lift all the water out too, even if you're just trying to lift the pigment. So I want to make sure that I still get those cool things happening. Next, we're actually going to do the background of the spider. And I love this reference photo, all of it, honestly. So I'm not taking too much creative license with this. I actually want to do a purple background, just like it's in the reference photo. And I think part of that is because that purple just makes the orange pop. I love it. So I want to do it. So I'm very excited. So I'm going to go ahead and paint the background. I have a 1-inch wash brush here, just tons of water, and I'm going to paint the background, and I'm going to go, I'm going to leave a margin, a little bit of a margin around the legs because those are hairy and kind of softer. And I'm going to kind of, I think, go mostly right up to the head with the water because that looks like more of a harder edge. And I want you to have your scraping tool handy, and then we can go ahead and get started. So I'm going to leave this one for water, and then I have a second flat brush. This one's just 3/4 inch. And I'm going to try to get a nice, beautiful, deep purple. So I'm going to just kind of let this mix on the paper. We'll see how that goes. We can always, change our path as we go. And I'm also going to consider the light side and the dark side. So getting lighter as we move towards the right side of the painting, darker as we move to the left. So I'm just laying down. This opera pink is actually straight from the tube. So it's already nice and soft. Laying down lots of that. And I do have to soften my ultramarine, and then we'll be adding that too. So I'm just kind of adjusting water and color. I'm trying to keep this pretty wet because I want to manipulate the edges a little bit. So I'm just trying to keep that in mind as I'm painting. I kind of like the pink, the pink little highlight right there. It's not typically a color you would associate with spiders, and I kind of like that. So it's really a lot of fun when you have big areas of abstract color like this. I typically don't have areas quite this big because I usually don't do backgrounds in my animal portraits. So this is fun. It's just like, ooh, this is fun. It's just fun to see where your brush takes you, you know. And I don't want to take it too far. Sometimes I go too far. I got rated M. Look at the granulation over here, the pink. Oh, it's so pretty. So I want to think too about scraping. And now I made it so wet that I can't scrape yet, but we can scrape dark shapes too. Oh, the other thing I wanted to do was my grainer brush. So maybe pulling in some of that background. I didn't leave as much margin as I should have, but there we go. That's kind of cool. I almost want to do a little bit of background right here and some grainer brush. You can definitely see this is a different purple too than the purple in the photo, but I really like it. You could make it more like the photo, I think, if you added some quinacridone, is my guess. But I'm also not doing that, so you're going to have to just experiment on your own and see if that works. This is so cool. It's already starting to take shape from this. So I am scraping a little bit right now to get the darker lines. And I purposely did not mask out these awesome whiskers that this guy has. I didn't want it to look as stiff as I know masking would make it look. All right, so that's going to take a while to dry, and I'm going to keep an eye on it as we continue to move on. Just adding a little bit more blue to the dark side to make it darker. Oh, how fun was that? Let's see, I want to almost blend in a little bit of this into the foreground. So I'm just going to touch a little bit here. So it's kind of obvious that we're in the foreground. That looks so cool. Doesn't that look cool? Adding some color. I am just staring at this granulation. Opera pink. Whoa. It just makes me happy. I just splattered. Right up there. So I'm just adding a little splatter if I think it will help. If it will help. I'm not sure that it did. But I'm having too much fun. I'm just going to lift some of that out too. So I'm kind of scraping some of these bigger whiskery shapes, and I'm going to probably go back in with some black too to emphasize those a little bit more. I'm achieving a little bit of scraping success with the dryness level here. It's also filling in too, so it's not complete success. I have plain water on my grainer brush, and I'm just seeing if water resist will work or if it's too early. Kind of have to have like a blotted level of water on your grainer brush, and your paper has to be almost dry. So I had decent luck with scraping. I didn't want to scrape everywhere either. I kind of tried to cluster it. So I like the grainer brush, I like the scraping, and I think that's good for edge control with our background right now. Let's do the head around the eyes. So the eyes are dry enough where I feel comfortable going in, and I'm going to paint with water and basically just kind of going on the head, but I'm giving myself some nice margin around the background and the eyes. So not quite all the way up to the eyes or the background. And I'm using my big flat brush for this just because it'll hold more water and allow me to cover the area a little bit quicker. And the first thing I'd like to do is lay down some buff titanium on that furrier bottom part of the head. Really heavy mix of buff titanium on a nice wet brush here, and I'm just going to lay that on the bottom. And on the dark side. Then I'm going to use the same brush, so it's still really dirty with buff titanium, and grab some quinacridone, a nice heavy mix of that on a nice wet brush. And I'm putting that towards the top of the head, and then just letting it go where it wants to around here. And as I'm laying it down, my buff titanium is kind of getting off my brush. It's becoming more saturated with quinacridone, which is a good thing. It's kind of what I'm looking for too. I'm kind of refining the margins a little bit too. I want there to be a little bit of a margin though. I kind of like how that looks. I'm going to take that same brush and grab some azo yellow. And my azo yellow is pretty dirty. It has some opera pink in it too. I'm trying to pick up as much as I can. And I'm going to kind of go around that outside edge of this little eye. And I am touching the background, but I kind of wanted to see what would happen when I did that. And I don't really like what's happening. It's kind of pretty. I'm going to grab a little opera pink on that same brush and kind of touch the background on that dark side too, over here. Need a little more opera pink. Need a lot more opera pink. Scrubbing that in and trying to get some opera pink there. And my background on that side is just too dry. It's not really doing anything. I'm going to just go right along that edge with a wet brush. Maybe it'll smear out a little bit. Look kind of neat. I'm going to grab some purple now. So I'm going to actually mix up some purple in my wells, since I'll have a smaller space to work in. I am still using this very messy brush over here. I'm going to grab a cleaner brush and come in with, again, purple. But hopefully it won't be so opaque because I have a cleaner brush, but we'll see. There's buff titanium everywhere in my wells. It's just everywhere. This looks so ridiculously cool, doesn't it? Okay, I do have my brush out here. I'm going to hope that it's still wet enough for me to put some of that yellow brush out in along this area. I like how it is becoming part of the background. That looks so abstract and cool. So I'm glad we didn't wait too long. I just, the more water, the better. So I'm adding some water to some parts of this brushel where it just got too dry and now the brushel's not doing anything. Maybe I can put some water on there. There we go. That looks cool. So I'm just spraying some water on here with my brush. Maybe that can activate the brushel. It'll give us some texture too, which is nice because this part of the spider actually has quite a bit of texture on it. All right, I'm just running my brush around and giving it some texture. I don't really know what I'm doing, but it's a lot of fun. Just seeing if maybe scraping some of that color would look kind of cool. And just right there. I'm going to cut this off. I think that's plenty spread out. So I'm just lifting right there. Lifting a little bit more. So I just have a flatted brush, nice and clean, lifting off some of this extra pigment up at the top. And I'm just kind of lifting on the light side a little bit here too. And I'm scraping, a lot of scraping in this painting because it's just such a hairy creature. Buff titanium is doing some really cool things, but I'm trying not to get my hopes up too high because it can so very easily dry a lot more muddled than it looks right now. But it's kind of cool too how if you scrape and you have some color mixes on your page, that the staining colors will kind of stay and stain the paper. That can look really cool. And you scrape off a color to reveal another color instead of just the paper. That can look really neat. We always have our Posca pen that we can come back and do some more detail at the end. In the meantime, I'm just over the moon about it. This is really fun. Okay, so I think I'm going to do a similar thing and kind of go section by section, dark to light. Very wet. Just try to achieve this illusion of a spider here, which I think illusion is a good word because of the muddling that happened up here. Oh, I just added a bunch of water that I didn't mean to add. Okay, let me just lift that out. I was trying to lift out more and my brush was really wet, so I ended up dropping in quite a bit of water. There. All is well. I just like that little forehead being lighter. Anyway, let's go ahead and do a similar thing. Let's just start with this leg, and maybe we'll learn some things as we paint each leg, one at a time, moving that way. We'll see how it goes. This leg is probably the easiest here. It's very dark, and I have so much of this mud because I used buff titanium and quinacridone and blue. A lot of mud. So I'm just going to kind of pick up the mud and put it where I kind of like this border of white. I wish I would have left maybe more margin, but I'm okay with it. I like the illusion of white hair here, and I'm just trying to kind of get the values right. I don't want to put too much orange, and I just kind of realized that. So I'm going to try to avoid orange. I really want that orange to pop in the head area. So maybe I won't go too crazy with that. I'm just saying, hey, you can kind of hang out over here too if you want. But a little orange in the mud you make, that purple mud, mostly purple, I think that looks fine. The other thing I want to do is obviously keep my scraping tool handy, but I also want to keep in mind those cute black stripes that he has on his legs. So I'm going to touch that farthest leg, let it hang out, come into this leg. Nice little layer of water, nothing crazy, not pooling. I'm going to go a little heavier on the blue in my mud at the top here. It looks like there's some pretty stripes that I don't want to lose out on. I think this is going to be the challenging part of not putting too much gold in here. So I'm going to get mud. I'm going to do another one. So I'm going to have like my flat brush be for the dark and this bigger flat brush be for the lighter. So I'm going to try to get some mud. It's like the word of the day right now. That's a little bit lighter. So maybe buff titanium is what we need in there. My whole palette is becoming mud right now. Oh my gosh, it's just like one big mud palette. But I still want a brush, just water. Put a little bit of that mud right there. Buff titanium mud. That'll be a good way to make it lighter. I do like that. So we'll have a darker mud that's more purpley. I think the key that to make it mud though is that we do have some quinacridone in there. And I'm kind of putting mud all down that side because that's the darker spot. This is just getting cooler and cooler as we go. The little white halo around these legs is so awesome. Loving that. I don't want to lose it. I lost it here, but I think that's okay because I didn't want it to be too sharp. We'll go in and soften that. I don't want to do too much with that. Maybe scrape a little bit. That looks cool. I'm trying to be a little bit reserved. I've already gone crazy with the scraping, but it's also a big part of this guy. I'm wishing I had another flat brush, but I'm just lifting too. I don't want to lose the lights too much, even though we're still on the dark side. So I can lose them a little bit. Okay. I don't even know if those things are legs, but they are now. We're going to go with it. So I'm going to go ahead. I have my lighter brush here. I'm just going to use that to paint with water. Definitely still has that buff titanium mix on it. And I think I kind of want to just paint these legs and then come in and we can fill in. some of those details. That looks really cool. Isn't that cool? It looks so cool. All right, getting those bands, dark areas painted in, and some shadows at the same time. Okay, this might be the funnest thing I've ever painted. I stopped recording and just like took a deep breath because I didn't quite know how to approach this. I've never painted something so hairy, which is funny to say because that's all I do is paint hair. I paint animals with hair. But this is just wiry, whiskery in a cool way. Okay, I am wanting to maybe put a little bit of that gold in as we get closer to the light side. So I do have that on my brush, that quinacridone gold kind of blend. And as we get over to the light side, I think it would be smart to make it look like it's getting some light. And maybe we'll glaze with some azo yellow at the end. We only have 2 legs left. So I'm going to go ahead and move to this one. It's on a dirty brush, but basically just painting with water, but with my dirty brush here. And we're going to just go for it and do this one right away too. All right, we got that beautiful mud, this just gorgeous purple. So pretty. A little bit of that quinacridone is what's making it that really pretty purple. And depending on how much water you put on your legs, it is going to make it spread or not spread too much. The other cool thing that I'm seeing happening are these like hook type whiskers. I want to make sure I scrape those right away. And I know I might lose some of these when I go in and do the background shapes. But we'll figure it out. We're going to figure it out as we go. Now I'm just going scrape crazy, aren't I? Oh, when you hit the right perfect moment to scrape though, it's hard to stop. It's hard to stop scraping. I can't stop. And I've already scraped so much. I have to calm down. That's perfect. That's perfect. A little bit on each one. It's great. Look how great that is. Let's grab some of that gold we were talking about. And I'm just going to kind of feather that in. That's pretty. That's pretty to do as it gets towards that light side. I'm wondering, I don't think I'm going to put yellow over there. Oh, man, I really want to. Do I do it? I can't decide. I just love this yellow, and I don't want to take away from that. But I also want to highlight this area a tiny bit of yellow. Let's see. It's on a very muddy brush, so it's like I didn't even do it. That might be something we'll just glaze at the end if we find the courage. I kind of like this leg with no scraping. It's just, they're going to have to fill in that information on their own. All right, I think before we do kind of the abyss of the belly, we could knock out these like fang things that it has. I'm just going to splatter a little bit of water on the leg. It's at a cool place of drying that might look kind of neat. And it's kind of a different way to add texture without scraping, because we've done a lot of that. If you painted the frog with me, we went splatter happy on the frog too. It's just fun. It's fun. That's the most fun stage of watercolor, is when it's almost dry. I mean, there's just infinite things you can do at that point. Okay, again, I'm giving myself a little bit of a margin here. If you accidentally do touch it in some spots, so I actually think that looks really cool. So that's why I'm never a little like over careful. Because I did touch it right there, but that looks really neat. I think that looks so cool. So we just want to make sure that, I'm going to touch it right here, let that hang out, come on over. I just want to make sure that we're also, before we do this belly abyss, we can distinguish some of the features in the spider. Because it's a very wet on wet spider. So I don't want to lose it. I don't want to lose it too much. All right, I'm going to come in with my mud, my purple mud, and kind of just do these darkest dark areas. And I don't really see this on the reference photo, but I'm kind of doing the dark on this dark side, the light on the lighter side, even though he clearly has some like stripe things happening. I think that'll help. I think if I did those stripes in this shape, we would kind of lose the shape. And that might be a little frustrating. So now I'm just taking my plain brush with water here, seeing if I need to soften the edges. I think it would look cool too, since some of these areas of the shark, I've never painted a shark, of these spider, very dark. So if I can kind of still keep the shape pattern and come in with a little bit of neutral tint, these really dark areas, make it look kind of neat. Give it some dimension, a little bit of dimension. Boy, I've never had such a great experience with mud. It makes you want to explore that even more. This is so cool. This is so fun. Every time I have these experiences with watercolor and I'm just surprised by the magic of it, I kind of just feel bad inside for all the oil and acrylic painters who've only ever experienced maybe frustration with watercolor. Now, if you love painting oil and acrylic, that's a different story because you're just enjoying your medium. But it just makes me sad. I am kind of negative painting around the scraping over here with the neutral tint and then softening it in. But it just makes me a little bummed out, you know, that maybe they've only ever experienced frustration with watercolor. When if you harness the power of water in watercolor and experience that, it's just like a whole new world can open up. It's just so fun. So I'm trying to get these stripes in, these legs, which ideally I probably should have done before I moved on to other sections. So where I'm putting these stripes that have dried too much, where they're not actually dispersing on their own, I'm either softening the edges with some water or I'm kind of negative painting around the lines we scraped, or both, a little bit of both. So I'm using it both for the stripes that we're seeing in the spider and kind of to get the shadows. So I'm really just looking at everything as I'm moving around these areas that we've already painted. Trying to see if there's anything else I can do while they dry. I wasn't going to scrape that leg. There I am scraping it. All right, I'm kind of going into the abyss here a little bit. I just saw the opportunity to do so. So just leaving a margin between these shapes we've already painted. And it might look really cool to just leave this alone and make it this beautiful, pristine wash of color. And it won't end up beautiful and pristine. I'm gonna manipulate it and it's gonna get all funky. But for the moment in time, I thought, well, wouldn't that be cool if I could actually leave it alone long enough to achieve that? I might get my hopes up too high. All right, I'm going to grab some more mud, so I kind of have to make it. It's my blue, my pink, and a little bit of that quinacridone. And I kind of want a heavy mix of that on my brush because I want it to move down into the abyss here. To establish more of this. Just, honestly, just to get the values right so it looks like there's some depth there. And I wanted to get drop a little bit of neutral tint on this side of those pretty stripes. All right, get a little more of that mud. And I kind of want to do the same thing on this light side if I can somehow get it really light. Is that possible? I'm trying to think that through a little bit. Before we do that, obviously, surprise, I'm scraping. Surprise! I think we're good on the scraping. I think it's obvious that he's wiry. Right? It's got to be obvious by this point.
It's so obvious.
And now I found another spot where I'm having a lot of fun with scraping. But actually, it's kind of cool to discover these little areas because then you won't have to go in with your Posca pen, which is so much better because you're not going to achieve this kind of glowy look with a Posca pen. You're going to just achieve that white line. And if you can kind of cluster the scraping, then you're winning too. Oh man. Oh, I scraped the eye. That was not my intention. Oh gosh. Now we're having too much fun. I'm just trying to make sure I clean my palette knife between the scraping. I love it. I can't stop. I just love it so much. Look at that, how it just reveals the yellow under there when you scrape kind of that buff titanium layer off. It is so cool. It's like the coolest thing ever. You could do water resist too, if you catch it just right. Get those areas that look like they're 10 seconds away from being completely dry. And you just use a blotted brush. Try to catch those little moments. I love this. I have to make mud more often because it just blends and separates on the paper and granulates like the coolest ways. This is fun. So I'm just doing some water resist and honestly just seeing if I can, if it's gonna work. It's working. It's working a little bit. This is so fun. I love this painting. I love it. It's just so gnarly. It's so much color too in the background, especially. All right, I'm just gonna grab plain water on my bigger wash brush. It's dirty water, which is kind of cool. And I'm kind of just going to see if I can, I don't know, that really pulled up here. I really want that to kind of stay white. I don't want to lose it. It's kind of like the light side of an animal over here, and I want to just kind of suggest what's happening. I like that there's some pink. I think it needs a little bit of pink over here just to kind of bring the background into the shape, if that makes sense, into the shape of the spider. I just don't want it to be too harsh, but I like that. I really like that. I don't know if I'm going to do too much more than that. I do love this pink though. I want to make sure I have enough pink happening actually in the spider. I'm just kind of putting this mud color in the shadow of whatever he's on. I don't know what it is. And in the background a little bit. I just want to mesh. It seems a little disjointed, the vibrancy of the background and like the muddiness of the spider with that buff titanium in there. So I'm wondering if we can kind of achieve some of congruency if we do some glazing mostly. All right. So now I put some, too much. I put too much yellow over here. I want to try to get a cleaner yellow, one that isn't so heavy on the quinacridone. I'm just lifting some of that out. I'm kind of hoping for more of a this yellow, but I'm also a little nervous, like I said before, because I don't want it to, yeah, I don't think I'm going to put it anywhere else. I really want that yellow to just be the pop of color in the spider. It kind of feels crazy to me that we're almost done. Like it went really fast. But that's what watercolor can do. It can just, water is fast. And it lends itself to looking good when you paint fast. Okay, I just have a total mess because I put all my stuff on my painting. But I don't mind that at all because I end up having things happen that I wouldn't have put on there otherwise, and then it looks really cool. But sometimes they look a little too messy and I just want to soften them up a little bit. So I'm going to just kind of make some of that mud. Quinacridone, blue, there's buff titanium in there. Pink, the cool thing with mud is you can kind of put whatever color you want on it. Because that's the point. I want to make it pretty dark though, so I'm going to actually add some neutral tint too. That looks good. That looks like good mud. See if I can get... I kind of have to negative paint the mud. That's a little bit of a challenge. Looks cool though. So basically I am just kind of glazing with mud, which I never would have thought would have been something I would have done to one of my paintings. All right, now I'm just kind of grabbing water and softening that little glaze into the vibrant background. I'm going to lift a little bit of that out. There we go. That looks cool. Now it looks shadowy. I'm just grabbing like straight up neutral tint. I want to make sure that I have dimension where I need it. So kind of negative painting too between those scraped lines. Give us a little bit of dimension. You don't have to do a lot. And I found negative paintings easier, or looks better too when you do it with a flat brush instead of a round brush. You can just get kind of sharper lines. I just love this painting. I just love it. Okay, we are basically done. I just want to refine the eyes. So I can't really put my supplies in the picture right now because the painting is wet and it would just mess it up. But I'm thinking I'm just going to be softening these edges. So I just have this nice kind of blotted wet brush, water only, blotted, and I'm basically kind of scrubbing the edges on the outside edge of that margin to soften it and make it look like there's this nice little highlight around the edge of the eye without it being that harsh line that it is. And then as my brush gets dirty, I just clean it off. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward this part, but that's all I'm doing. I'm just kind of scrubbing the pigment, lifting it off, cleaning my brush, water only, refining this hard edge on the outside of the eyes. So here I go doing that really quick. All right, I like to just grab a little purple, like a clean purple, not a buff titanium purple. And maybe we can kind of glaze a little bit around that edge on the dark side. That looks nice. It just puts it into shadow a little bit more. So trying to do that on this part of the eyes. On the dark side, just the dark side. I'm not gonna do that over there. And I'm kind of even softening the outside edge of the actual black eye we painted and letting that run into that glazed area as well. All right, that's all that I need to do for that kind of. I want the white of the eye white highlight areas to be clean on this side if I can manage it. So I'm just kind of softening a little bit to make the shape of these circles accurate, not too wobbly here. And then it's just kind of softening these reflections. So I like to just kind of pull a little bit of that existing color that's around it into kind of the outside edges of the reflections. And nothing too crazy, but I'm starting on the dark side eye because that one, the reflections are almost basically not even white. And you can even grab some cobalt and kind of glaze into the reflections and into the eye itself as you're softening those reflections. And that looks really cool, huh? Oh, it's such a fun, easy way to do an eye. So I'm just kind of doing that. I'm trying not to completely disintegrate those scraped lines that we achieved. I really like how thin they are, and I think that's really important to keep them nice and thin so they look good. And sometimes when I'm doing this too, I'll even kind of go in and almost create another reflection just by lifting out some color right next to the reflections that we didn't even paint with. And that can look really cool. That can give the eye this really nice dynamic reflective look. And then your colors are staining the paper too, so you're getting that. I mean, that looks really cool, right? Looks so cool. And then giving some of these reflections more harder edges. So I'm kind of softening and adding color to the dark side part of the reflections, and then keeping the reflections more of those sharper edges as they get towards the light side. Oh my gosh. That's crazy that that's all we need to do. I love my ink pen. So I want to see if maybe just some ink pen. And what I'm going to try doing is kind of putting the ink pen on an existing scraped whisker. So I don't really want to make a new whisker shape. I kind of want to just see if emphasizing an existing whisker shape would look cool. So I just have my ink pen and I kind of just, and the cool thing about this specific ink pen too is that you can manipulate it until it's dry. It does dry quickly, so you don't have like ridiculous amount of time, but all right, I'm just taking a look at this because I don't want it to detract too much attention from the eyes. The eyes are the darkest dark, and I really want to keep it that way. This looks so, but it looks so cool. So I'm just gonna see if maybe just, I do like the little floppy kind of whisker shapes he has on both sides of his head, but I'm not gonna put him over there, even though he has them over there. That would be really distracting, I feel like. And I feel like even this was maybe too much. It's just so dark, but I think it looks cool, but it's also really dark. So let me do some more and really distract from the eyes. Let me go crazy. Oh my gosh. So funny. It's hard to stop sometimes. That's the tough thing with the ink pen is like you get one color. You can't really manipulate the color you're putting down with a pen. So clearly putting some whiskery shapes where there aren't scraped lines too. I'm liking this. I'm trying to convince myself I like it. No, I do like it. There. That's all I want to do with that. I'm not sure. I'm not even sold on that, honestly. That I just, I'm not sure that that achieved what I was after in terms of, well, just because it kind of took attention away from the eyes. I'm actually going to go in and buff titanium these guys a little bit. So I've got a really heavy mix of buff titanium on my size 2 brush. I'm kind of going right over those darker pen lines. It's tough because I think it's the combination of both that it's dark and that it's a line. All right, at this point in the video, my audio cut out, but you will see that I am using my ink pen to create a couple more whiskery, hairy details on the dark side of the spider, specifically on the legs. And this is pretty self-explanatory. You just use the pen to make these shapes, and then I'm using a blotted brush with water only to soften them in a little bit, especially towards where the whiskers meet the legs. If you like what you see and you love what you're learning, please feel free to hit subscribe and like this video. We just painted our jumping spider. We love it. I hope you had the best time painting this jumping spider with me.